I think the one question I kept asking myself is, what have I done in my life to end up here? So.
Behind your back. You're gonna get it again. Put your hands behind your back. Hands behind your back. Put your hands.
The officers who committed this crime should be fired and prosecuted to the full extent of the law.
We, the jury, find the defendant Christopher Shane Burbank not guilty of the crime of murder in the second degree as charged in count 1. We, the jury, find the defendant Matthew J. Collins not guilty of the crime of murder in the second degree as charged in count 1. We, the jury, find the defendant Timothy Eugene Rankine not guilty of the crime of manslaughter in the first degree as charged in count 1.
The level of evilness that they undertook to charge us and put us through this whole entire thing, was like, you can't put words to it.
How are you? How are you doing?
I'm okay. It's been, a very interesting last few years.
Yeah.
But, finally now it feels like things have finally kind of wrapped up and I can start, me and my family can start, moving forward and just trying to start a new chapter of our lives.
How long had you been on the force when this happened?
Oh, I was still a very young cop. I think I was maybe 2.5 years in.
Why did you want to be a police officer?
I mean, I've always had this dedication to serve, our nation, serve other people. I've always had this big care to help others in need. The one story I always tell, like why I decided to join the military and serve this country, being an immigrant, I look at it as this country has given me so many opportunities. This country is such a great country. But I remember 9/11 when it happened, and I was in 8th grade in Georgia. First time I ever seen my dad cry.
Yeah.
After that day, I was just like, somehow, some way, I just always felt a calling to go back to the military.
I'll kind of share this from my perspective, being in the news. To me, it was like George Floyd happened. Mm-hmm. And then, the country explodes over George Floyd. Mm-hmm. And after that, I feel like people started to revisit the night that Manny Ellis died. Is that what it felt like for you too? That it wasn't this big thing until George Floyd?
Yeah, exactly. I would say you're 100% spot on. And,
okay.
This is the part where, I feel like, very few people knew what happened and how things kind of progressed to the point where we got charged. So, George Floyd happened, our incident happened, and we were put on admin leave for 2 weeks. We voluntarily gave a recorded statement 3 days later to the Pierce County deputies about it. And, 2 weeks later, we were cleared. We were back working when George Floyd happened. I remember it. And after that whole incident, so Tacoma had a bunch of BLM protests and stuff, and I remember working all of them. I remember when they were in the hilltop and they, the mayor was walking with the BLM protesters as they were destroying the city.
Wow.
And you're like, as cops, we were told not to enforce anything. We're just there to basically, like, for lack of a better term, protect them
Yeah.
by making sure that there's no cars coming at them and stuff. So we basically were like crowd control.
Yeah.
And so the day prior to the city of Tacoma's mayor coming out and publicly saying what she said,
Yeah.
I was working the BLM protests the night prior, and I was positioned at the the Tacoma Mall, because we had intel sources that told us that, you know, there's a good chance that Tacoma Mall will get ransacked and burned or looted.
Yeah.
So they stationed a bunch of us at the mall, and the mayor actually came out to the mall. And this is the funny story of it, is she shook my hand and literally like looked me in the eye and said, "Thank you for what you do in protecting the city." And then I go in the next day to work the BLM protests, and you know, my sergeant was like, "Hey, we're gonna release you guys' names," like, and I was just like, "Okay, like standard," and he's like, "It's standard protocol, like to release you guys' names since you guys are cleared." And I was like, "Okay." I was like, "Anything to worry about?" And he's like, "No, you're all good." I was like, "Okay." I remember like we're still working this protest and just driving around. This is like a daytime protest, and there was actually, the protest was in the sector that I was working. And you know, you're driving around, you're seeing like all the signs and stuff, and then I look, and I think one of the news outlets actually has a picture of it, but it literally has my first name and last name, Timothy Rankine, murderer, on a big sign. I'm like, ooh, well, that's not good.
Is that the first time you realized there was going to be an
Yeah,
issue?
that was the first time I think it was just like a
Wow.
big clear sign, like, you know, like no pun intended, but big clear sign that, oh, this could be something else.
Yeah.
And so I remember like pulling off and then like getting on the phone call with my sergeant and be like, "Hey, so I just saw a sign with my name and it says murderer," and then like, you know, the other two officers' name. And I was just like, "What do you want me to do here?" And he's like, "Well, I think the protest is wrapping up, so he's like, you can take off, like just go home." And I was like, "Okay." And so, you know, I didn't think much about it. I was like, okay, maybe just kind of blow over or whatever. And then left to go home. I was sitting at home, I think it was like around 7 p.m. I got a call from one of the assistant chiefs, and I'm like, "Oh, that's kind of weird."
Yeah, yeah.
So I get this, you know, a call from the assistant chief, and he's telling me, he's like, "Hey, so the mayor is gonna make a public statement
my
about
God.
the incident." And I was like,
And-
"Okay."
And at this point, it had been the 3 weeks.
Yeah,
or
so it's been
Right.
3 weeks, but at that time, it's still being investigated. Like the investigation is not concluded, so there's not really any facts that's out there, you know. So yeah, so I was just like, okay, and you know, my chief is like, you know, we advise her not to say anything about it, just talk about it, but don't go into too much detail about it, just because the facts are not out there yet. And I
Right.
was like, okay. And so I remember just like being on the phone with him and then like turning on the TV and watching it. And then, I mean, the clip is what everyone is seeing is her publicly, you know, calling for our prosecution and calling us, you know, racist murderers.
The officers who committed this crime should be fired and prosecuted to the full extent of the law.
Did you realize in the moment when the mayor said what she said that like your life was going to be different?
I think part of me knew it was going to be different. I just didn't know the extent to how different it was going to be. Yeah, I think, yeah, I don't think if you put me back in the same position where I'm sitting, you know, on my bed watching it in my room, with what she said, and you know, he's like, would you have think that your life 5 years now down the road would be the way it is now? I would, you know, there's no way to predict that. Like, you just can't.
Sorry to be crass, but are your parents still with us?
Yes.
So what was that like? I can already tell how much you love your parents. I mean, you got emotional talking, you know, recollecting your dad at 9/11. What was it like to have to sort of, I mean, how did they find out, or did you explain to them? What was that like?
Yeah, I actually couldn't find the words to explain it to him. You know, how do you tell your parents, you know, like, your son's about to go through hell, and, you know, like, where do you go from there, you know? So, you know, my parents at the time lived in Bothell, so, yeah, that was a hard conversation, and I don't think, you know, even now to this day, I think if you ask them, they probably have no idea how bad it was going to become for us. I don't think anyone had an idea how bad it was going to become for us.
So you guys are going through these investigations, and as you said earlier, you know, one after another, they're clearing you, you know, acted in line with training, with policy and procedure. So when the internal reviews happen, and then I think it was an external law enforcement review, and they clear you, did you think that that was it?
I mean, part of me thought it was it, but something, I don't know, maybe it's a gut feeling or something, but I think we had caught wind that the city mayor, Victoria Woodard, for the city had approached Jay Inslee at the time for, you know, about this case. And so it was just this whole, ask Jay Inslee, and then Jay Inslee asked Bob Ferguson, and then it's just this whole, so it's like this whole rigmarole that we kind of had this gut feeling. It was like, if the state was to do something, they could probably do it because now they have all the big parties involved. Once we got charged, we that changed everything for us because we had, Tacoma had to put, like, station a patrol officer outside our house 24/7. And then other law enforcement agencies helped out. They had to put cameras on a house to monitor it. Our mail had to be all gone through because, you know, the threat level at that time when we were charged was just so, yeah, it's just unthinkable.
Take me through that day. I mean, I remember it very well, but from your perspective, did you have advanced warning that Bob Ferguson, as the Attorney General, was going to charge all of you?
So this is where, I think this is where, like, it really takes the cake on how dirty the state did us. So, you know, like I mentioned, we had lawyered up, and I still remember, you know, my lawyer had tried to reach out to the Attorney Generals because he was in contact with them for quite a while. But then 2 weeks prior to us being charged, they kind of just went radio silence. No communication, no nothing. And the only message he got from him was, pay attention to this date and you will know whether or not your client's being charged. And I was just like, what?
Wow.
What kind of response is that for the state? But, you know, it is what it is. And, you know, I remember, so the day that we got charged, I mean, it was you want to talk about timing things, it's the same week as George Floyd anniversary. You know, me, Shane, and Matt were all combat vets that did the same job, got deployed numerous times. So, you know, you ask any combat vet that has been deployed multiple times, Memorial Day weekend was that weekend. And I was like, for most veterans, Memorial Day is, you know, tough weekend for us. Because, you know, you remember a lot of the people that died overseas, all your friends. So I was actually on my way to a tattoo appointment, of all things. I was on my way there, and I was on the highway, and, you know, my wife now, but back then, you know, we were just friends. She calls me and says, hey, you need to look at this. And I was like, what? Okay. And so I look at it, and it's, I think, a news article. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I end up pulling off of the side of the road on the highway and reading it. And so I found out we were being charged the same time everyone else was.
Unthinkable.
Yeah. And I remember getting off the phone with her, reading the article, instantly taking the next exit, start heading home, get on the phone with my lawyer, and my lawyer's like freaking out. He simply tells me, he's like, I'm on the phone with State Patrol right now. And he's like, there's been a warrant issued out for you guys' arrest, right? But so we found out at like I think 12:30 in the afternoon that we were charged, but the warrant had been in the system since 9 a.m. So right when the courts opened, they issued out a warrant and they didn't tell us about it.
Wow.
And so,
Because I imagine you would have been happy to come in if
Yeah.
this was
Oh-
the
oh,
case.
yeah.
Like, let's
I
just
mean-
do this.
yeah, I'm a cop. I respect the law. I understand the law. Like, I would not have, if you asked me to turn myself in, I would turn myself in willingly. But, you know, the lawyer at the time, he said, hey, just, like, he's like, I'm trying to help you guys out. He's like, but State Patrol has an arrest team waiting for you guys. And I was like, okay, so it's basically they set us up to make it like a big ordeal because they want to see us. This is how I picture it in my head. They want to see us get escorted out of our house in handcuffs in front of the media because why? It looks good for the state.
And for somebody who wants to be governor.
It's like, look at this cops. We got the cops, you know. But he was able to talk to whoever in State Patrol, and we ended up just arranging a meeting at his office in Pierce County, which is like right across from Pierce County Jail. That's where we were supposed to turn ourselves over. There I was, turn around, put my hands behind my back, and put handcuffs on, and then, you know, got escorted out to his patrol car, and then drove over to Pierce County Jail, and then went through the whole booking process, just like any criminal that I've ever arrested, go through the whole booking process. And then I think I was one of the last one. I was the last one in, like, to turn myself over to Pierce County. But, you know, Matt and Shane were already there, and we were kind of like in the cells right beside each other. I could hear one of the other officers, I'm not gonna say who, but, you know, he was pretty emotional. You could hear him crying. So it's like, you're sitting there in jail and you're like, what did I do to end up here? And then you hear like a fellow officer you look up to just crying in jail. And you're like, it's almost like this like sixth sense of like torture. I think the one question I kept asking myself is, what have I done in my life to end up here? So, you know, you think back on it and you're like, man, what did I do to end up here? And then you're just like, you know, the number one answer is, I don't know. I didn't do it. I feel like I've done a pretty good job living my life and trying to be a good human being. You know, when it comes to the other two guys, I mean, you're talking like a whole different caliber of a police officer. You know, like they were like the go-to like police officers when things went wrong. You know, like they were the ones that you wanted there. You know, Shane Burbank had trained majority of the South End police officers. So it's like this guy has quite a few years under his belt. He's trained most of us, and I remember my training with him, it was really good training. Like it taught me to be a good officer because you basically use him as an example and you try to mimic him, and the same way with Matt Cons. So it's like, you know, when I became partners with you know, my partner Messiah Ford, we tried to mimic them. Like we want to be a two-man car in our sector because they were in the sector right next to us, but we cross-train all the time. We wanted to be like them, be like those officers because they were the go-to.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, Messiah Ford is black, right? So I remember this coming out in all of your mugshots coming out, right? When this went further down the road. And, well, this is going to sound, again, like just an asshole question. But you're sitting there, you know, get to the point where you realize that, like, we are going to be thrown to the lions over this. And you mentioned the two officers and their names who, you know, were there, and then you came to back them up. Was there ever a part of you that thought, like, okay, they're the white ones, you know, I'm from Singapore, I'm an immigrant, my partner was black, like, let's just throw the two white cops under the bus. They had more seniority, and let's just blame it on them?
Nope, never.
Even when you're facing potential time in prison?
Nope,
like,
because
let's blame it on the white cops.
Because so Matt and Shane, the type of officers they are, no way. Like, no way, like the narrative that they put out there, there's no way that would have happened. Like that's how high caliber of an officer they were, that, just there's no way like that narrative would have been true. So for them to even call out for help that night is just unheard of. Like, they never call for assistance. So for them to call out for help that night and the way they did it, I mean, it speaks for itself. I mean, 20-some officers from 4 different agencies showed up to back those guys. So it's like, no matter what, like, yeah, I mean, they were family. They were fellow cops. I looked up to them. They were good officers.
But
so.
you know what would have worked, right? You know what would have worked? You, black partner, they were, we looked up to them.
Yeah.
We came, they told us what to do, we did it.
Never crossed my mind.
Yeah.
Never, ever.
Why wasn't your partner charged with anything? Do you know?
I mean, I have my theories.
You think it's because he's black?
Yeah.
It definitely seemed like it's inconvenient to the narrative.
Right.
If you have mugshots and all of a sudden there's a black man, it destroys this narrative that it's about race and
Right.
It's about, this black man. And so that's definitely what I thought, even being in mainstream news at the time.
Which, I mean, that's kind of the crazy narrative, right? That says that we're racist, like I'm a racist, right? My partner is black, gay, and Muslim. Aside Ford, he's such a smart dude, such a good cop, very smart, but he was there the whole entire time. Like, this whole incident was happening. He was right beside me the whole entire time. So it's like, whatever I was doing, he could see. Whatever he was doing, I could see.
What was that like, I guess, to see him convicted while you're awaiting trial?
Yeah, maybe I'm a glutton for punishment or whatever, but I watched the whole trial. I had to. Like, I had to, like, I think mentally I had to prepare myself for what was ahead. And so I watched the whole trial. But yeah, I was just like, well, this does not look very good for us, because it's like, if, with all the things the state has done to us to set us up to basically be this horrible human being, I was like, what else, like, what can we do to clear our name? Or even, at that time the press was super against us. They were saying some really outrageous stuff that was not even factually based.
How much did you worry about the ability, given the political climate, to be able to get jurors who would look at your case fairly?
200%.
You worried 200%? Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, to get examples of this is, like, KNKX had put out that podcast, so like A Long Walk Home or something of that sort, and it's won awards. It's not at all factually based.
Doesn't surprise me.
Off of a narrative that was put out, off of secondhand information, and so on and so forth. And that's what a lot of people, so our jury selection was very interesting in itself, and I don't think it was televised, but for most criminal trials, you have 100 to 150 jurors that you can pick from. Our trial was 360 jurors.
Yeah.
So it took a really long time to try to filter through, so many of the jury members. And then, the state, you do your whole entire questioning for the jury and stuff. But, during our jury selection, we had people openly come up and say, you guys are murderers, just because they read a news article, they listened to the podcast.
During the trial, how did you feel? Did you feel like things were going in your direction? Did you allow yourself to sort of guess what the outcome was going to be?
So for me, I think for me, the trial was very tough. It was really hard. I mean, it was hard on me, it was hard on my family, it was hard on my wife. But for me, I was seated directly in front of the jury. So I was told, don't show any facial expressions.
Yeah.
And I mean, like just watching like the footage of it, a lot of the still photos of us and stuff, like the cameras were always penned in on me because like I was the only face they could see. They couldn't see the other two officers because all you could see was the back of their head. But I think when the trial first started, it had a lot of, like even the opening statement for the state, it's very close to the George Floyd opening statement. You're like, kind of strange. A lot of the words, a lot of the buzzwords that were used in the George Floyd case was used in the opening statement for the state. And then, you know, the expert witnesses that they called, kind of the same like way they prosecuted the George Floyd case.
Wow,
You know,
so you're probably just thinking about
Yeah,
George
and so
Floyd,
because I watched it and I was thinking about it, and I was just like, yeah, that's pretty, you know, pretty tough. Like just tough to like listen, and it's just like all this medical theory that like, oh, this is what happened and this, and you know, it's just so hard because we did a record statement and the state basically was spinning it however they wanted to make us look like evil people. And then, you know, the one statement that I've always that they always used against me was that when I heard, you know, Mr. Ellis say he couldn't breathe, I said, well, if you can talk, you can breathe. But they leave out so much of it because in the same breath, and it's literally a full statement, was if you can talk, you can breathe. If you calm down, I'll relieve some pressure off of you. But it doesn't fit the narrative to include the other half of the statement.
Yeah.
But that literally was all said in one breath to him, and then, you know, I took pressure off of him.
I would venture to guess most of our audience has never been in a situation to be waiting for a jury of their peers to decide their fate. What is that like for you? What do you think about?
It's, for me, and you know, I can't speak for my wife, but I think she probably feels the way. For me, it was very taxing. You take the time and you're just sitting, you know, like, you know, I think Pierce County at that time, Ed Troyer had opened up an office for us to just kind of hang out, and because we weren't allowed to go very far from the courthouse, we basically could only be like 15 minutes away if a verdict came down. But you know, just sitting there and you're like, I think I sat quiet most of the time because you're just trying to not think about too much and trying not to feel anything. You're just like, you know, it is what it is. And so,
the prospect of having it be not guilty, be acquitted, must have seemed so out of reach, considering it has to be unanimous, you know? So can you even begin to describe filtering back in there and watching the jury come in, like what your body was doing and what your mind was doing?
Yeah, I can remember it very well, because I'm sitting like, you know, across from the jury members. The one jury member that I kind of always looked to, you know, she was older female, but I always had the sense she was like the mom of the jury, you know, so I always kind of looked to her, and my past training experience has led me to been trained to read people's body language. And so I was trying to read their body language, and most of the jury members, their body language was not very positive. And then looking at her, I was like, her face doesn't look very positive. Her body language doesn't look very positive. And, you know, I was just like, I can't do this. I can't do this to myself. And I think this where just like that one pretty good picture, it just shows like me, like just head down, just like staring at the desk because I couldn't look at the jury. Like I just couldn't. And then, you know, once they were seated, they go through it.
We, the jury, find the defendant Timothy Eugene Rankine not guilty of the crime of manslaughter in the first degree, as charged in count 1.
I see, I hear, I hear Ann and Mark start crying, and I'm like, well, what? Is that good cries? Like, are you crying good, or is this a bad cry?
Your attorney started to
Yeah,
cry.
and so I remember turning to Mark. It's like, yo, we good? Like, I remember, like, that's what I said to him. Yo, we good? And Mark just pats me on the back and says, it's over. And I was like, and he said, it's over. You guys are found not guilty. You guys are acquitted. And yeah. And then that's when, like, he catches that picture of me, like, hand in my face, because you're like, you know, you don't know how to process it. So I just, you know, shed a few tears and just glad it's over. It was just so, the whole thing was just so surreal. Like, just what they put us through. Yeah, just to be like sitting there and just be like, okay, the jury spoke. Yeah, and it's like, well, maybe we can start living our life again and not be under this dark cloud or, you know, and stuff. But, you know, I remember once we were done, the state cleared out pretty quick, and, you know, the Ellis family and their supporters cleared out really, really quickly too. And we were trying to get out of there as quickly as possible because, you know, we had intel that there was possible threats to us when we were leaving, you know, the courthouse. But I remember, like, when we were leaving, the media, right, of all people, they're in the very back row as we're leaving. And I remember, so Jared Brown, KNKX, he's the one that does the whole A Walk Home podcast. He was there. Patrick Malone from Seattle Times was there. And he was the one that was a big champion about writing all this obscene, like, unfactual articles just to make us look bad during the whole entire trial. I remember they turned to me and said, do you have any comments? Do you want to talk to us? As we're leaving the trial.
What'd you say?
I literally look at them and I, like, in my head, you know, I wanted to give him the bird or say something obscene to him, but, you know, I took the high road and left, just without saying anything. But that was the whole thing. It's like, not only were we fighting, you know, for our lives and fighting against what the state was doing to us, and then the narrative that the city of Tacoma had put out, we were also fighting the media, because the media was completely against us. There was no positive articles to us. Even still to this day, there's no positive articles for us.
I want to give you an opportunity, if you'd like to take it, to speak directly to some of the people involved in all of this.
Yeah.
You kind of mentioned it earlier, you know, thanking the jury for their time, but, you know, here you have a group of your peers, people who you served as a police officer, you know, despite all of the false reporting, despite the political climate, you know, despite their personal beliefs, who decided to look at the evidence and found you not guilty. What would you say to them?
Well, I mean, first of all, like, you know, I thank my lovely wife for supporting me, you know, and my family. You know, I thank the department for standing by us, past leadership like Don Ramsdale and all the chiefs, all their support. You know, Henry Batts, who was a great union president, to help us through all of this. You know, I thank the judge, the jury for what they did. You know, most importantly, the lawyers that represented me, the lawyers that represented the other guys. Without them, you know, we'd probably have been, in really bad shape. And we could not have picked any better lawyers to represent us. The bond that, you know, Mark had with Jared Osser from Matt's team, it was just like, you know, they're like bickering brothers that like kept going at it. You know, just there's so many people that supported us, and the people that support us and actually listen to the facts. You know, I thank you for listening to the facts, doing your own research, and figuring out what actually happened that night.
What would your message be to now Governor Bob Ferguson?
Man, I've thought about this for a long period of time.
And he will watch this.
Yeah.
So he will see this. And so I want you to really think about what you want to say to him.
I mean, I feel like I don't know what you can say. Like the level of evilness that they undertook to charge us and put us through this whole entire thing. I was like, you can't put words to it, you know? Like, to this day, like the AG Nick Brown still calls it a murder. Like newspapers still call it a murder. And it's like, how much more do we have to prove our innocence that we did not murder that guy that night? It's just, bad things happen. But yeah, to Bob Ferguson, to Patty Eakes, to Nick Brown, to all the people that came after us, I mean, I don't really have any words to say, but you know, this life is bigger than us. You're gonna face not my judgment, but a higher power's judgment. You're gonna face God's judgment at some point in time in life. And I hope you have a good reason to explain why you did what you did, because for me, I've made peace with it, that ultimately, like, I mean, I have nothing to say. I've made peace with it, that it's out of my hands now. It's God will judge you, not me.
And I imagine the message would be similar, but it's important to, I think, ask you this separately. I don't know if it hadn't been for Tacoma Mayor Victoria Woodard's comments that were put out there in the midst of all this political chaos, I don't know that it would have gotten to the point where you were charged. Has she ever offered any sort of apology?
Nope.
And what would you say to her?
I mean, I think overall, the thing I would say to her is, you know, I really don't have a lot of words to say to her besides, you know, I forgive you for what you did to us. And, you know, I hope you come up with a good reason to explain it to a higher power when Judgment Day comes, because, yeah, I mean, still to this day, they have not issued an apology. When we were acquitted, they didn't issue an apology. They apologized to the family, didn't apologize to us. Same thing with the chief at the time, did the same exact thing. I mean, as you know, we were involved in a lawsuit with the city. You know, they still think they did nothing wrong and said that, no, we didn't do anything wrong. You guys got charged because you guys got charged.
Yeah.
I beg to differ. You know, if you didn't say what you said, you didn't put out all this hate into the world and, you know, paint us in such evil, vile ways, I doubt, you know, that we would have ended up where we ended up now.
Yeah. Is there anything that you would say to Manny Ellis's family?
Yeah, I think the thing I would definitely say is, you know, I'm very sorry for your loss. If there was anything else I could have done to save his life, I would have done it. But there was nothing in my power I could have done to save his life. I hope you know, come to terms with, I mean, overall, I think I'm just sorry for their loss, and I hope they find peace in that. But yeah, when it, you know, one thing a lot of people, we talked about this quite a bit, but, you know, I always look back on it and, you know, I've heard so many people when they, like, you know, investigate a case and stuff, they're like, oh, Manny Ellis is such a bad dude, or he did this and that. And I always say my piece is, I really don't think Manny Ellis was a bad guy. I think he actually was a really good dude. His downfall was drugs. When he did drugs, he became a whole different person. Yeah. And that made him into a bad person when he did drugs. But overall, so to this day, I do think he's a really good dude. It's just drugs was his downfall. And it's like, whose fault is it? Is it his fault? Is it his family's fault? Is it the state's fault that drugs was such an epidemic in our state?
Yeah.
But yeah, ultimately, I think he's a really good dude. And I'm sorry that he passed away. I'm sorry for the loss for the family member.
What is next for you? Before we started, you said this stupid thing about wanting to maybe be a police officer again. Mm-hmm. Is that really in the cards for you, you think?
I hope so.
Have you been actively trying?
So right after we were acquitted, we took some time off and we did some traveling. But I tried to be a police officer in Washington State again. And the overall response I got was, it's not you, it's politics. We cannot hire you because of politics. And so it's like, that's like a hard pill to swallow, right? You're like, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm acquitted. I'm cleared on all this stuff, but you can't hire me because politics. Like, we were cleared on 5 different investigations.
Yeah.
We were cleared through Pierce County. We were cleared through Tacoma. We were cleared through State Patrol. And then now the acquittal with the AG's office, which clears us of any wrongdoing. And then now being cleared by the federal court. It's like, I don't know, how else do you prove your innocence in this? How else do you clear your name that says that you didn't do anything wrong and you did everything to the best of your ability that night of the incident? I'm dedicated to service, right? Like, I want to help other people. And, no matter what job I do, I don't feel a sense of purpose like I do as a police officer. And so, yeah, I'm trying hard to go back in the law enforcement field, whether it be in this state or outside of the state. But I don't know, maybe call me crazy or something.